Hello, Santa. All the girls and boys were all so excited. That was Santa.
And this will be my 33rd year as the man with the beard.
My God, well done.
And Joseph, will you help Mary, just in case she drops the baby?
The Christmas spirit, it's something you have to feel. And most of the time I don't. Sorry.
I can't say I dislike Christmas, but it's a huge fuss for 24 hours.
The jacket stuffed?
Yes, please.
Cards, wrapping paper, a holly wreath.
But everything is much more expensive this year.
I just put up the Christmas tree to fit in with everybody else. If I didn't put up a tree, it would be just like another time to me now.
Did you know Christmas is cancelled? It's because I told Santa I was good and he died laughing.
Loneliness is one thing, but being invisible and forgotten is something else.
I do start crying when they singing Christmas carols. I just want to be left alone.
I don't know how I'm going to get through Christmas.
For me, Christmas will never be the same again. But the important part is time.
The kindness of people is the Christmas message.
We put this percent here. He might give you a girlfriend or something.
As hard and all as things are, we're finding the joy in every day.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Carolyn Talks. This is the podcast / YouTube channel where I, your host, Carolyn Hayes, film critic and journalist, speak to film creators around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Ken Wardrop to talk about his documentary, but is it really? But it's a very interesting documentary. So this is Christmas, which is showing at the 2024 Hot Docs Documentary Film Festival here in Toronto. And I love that this film is about Christmas and is showing at a film festival in spring. I thought it was like a cute, a really funny aspect of the film festival being held here at this time, but also watching a film about Christmas in April. So, but first of all, thank you so much, Ken, for joining me.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for having me. It's a real honor, and we're so excited to be having the opportunity and the privilege to show the film at the Hot Docs Film Festival, which is obviously a prestigious documentary festival across the world. So yeah, all excited, as you said, to be presenting a Christmas film in springtime. You know, it's certainly not a USP.
You're right. So sometimes I usually like to ask my guests, like what got them involved in filmmaking and like how they, because no one's journey is the same. So how did you get involved in filmmaking? But then how did you decided that you wanted to focus on documentaries, you know, and like you have a very specific eye in the way you tell your stories, and this one is very specifically constructed, which I'm going to get into. But how did you start your path to becoming a filmmaker?
Okay, I was afraid you were going to ask that question up front because it's a bit of a long-winded answer.
That's okay.
Have all night. Okay, so long story short, I was never really a creative in growing up in school and so forth. I always avoided art class. I suppose that's the only kind of creative class you have when you're in what we call it secondary school. It's like your teenage years. So I managed to avoid that, and I studied geography and sociology first time around. And I was here in Dublin, and I disappeared to London to get, I actually went into my third year of university over there. While I was there, I started to work in a post-production company, which had my first opportunity and flavor of the film world. However, it wasn't really what got me into film. I came back to Ireland with an ambition after just going through those average sort of jobs. I don't want to call them average, just those jobs that you get to pay the bills as opposed to having any career trajectory at all. And I came home to Ireland and I said, I need to find myself. I need to find something that I love. Wasn't quite sure what that would be. And I happened to move into a house with someone who was studying film. And I started to help them. And during that time, they encouraged me to maybe apply for film. And I thought I'd go and probably do something in production design or producing or something in that vein. I'd no grand ambition to be a director. But while in film school, we were presented opportunities to do class projects, and we had to kind of get stuck into telling stories. And I started to make documentaries because my family were the cheapest people I could find and the most valuable people to me. So I went home and I did some short films on my family. The first of them was called Useless Dog, because I'm from a farming background, and we had a sheepdog who was both afraid of sheep and also quite lazy. So I did a little documentary, and that film just seemed to, capture some of that kind of innate humor that the Irish have when they're telling stories, and it actually traveled the world. And I got kind of the bug then, because it's like, okay, so people are kind of interested in these ordinary lives that my family have, and I started to explore that throughout my 4 years in college. And lo and behold, I ended up a documentary maker because of my wonderful family and what they afforded me during that time while I was in university. And I always, I suppose I always played with form because of that, because I'm working with my family and they are obviously sort of in a way so well used to me and having the ability almost to perform, because they know it's not the camera, they're kind of acting for me. And when I say acting, it's the camaraderie, it's the divilment, we call it in Ireland, when you're with someone you know really well. So we could bounce off each other and they forget the camera. So I was able to produce these really, I think, special films. Now looking back on them, I have a catalogue of these short little films about farming life in Ireland. And I guess I was the only sort of farmer on the film course. So it was, again, a USP that I had.
And I this is always why I always like asking this question, because like you can't predict what anyone's path is to becoming a filmmaker or working in anything in the film industry. And I think for documentaries in particular, like there's you have to have a sense of curiosity about the world around you. And I think you also have, you should, because I would say sometimes some filmmakers don't have it, but you should have a respect of the world that you're in, and an understanding of the world you're in to some extent, but also a love and a care. Because if you're showing these regular people, especially for your films, that you're showing people in their regular life and you're having them talk about things that are painful for them, or things that society might not necessarily understand about them or about the way they live, you have to be able to be empathetic towards them and have that empathy translate through the screen. And I think for a film like this, so This Is Christmas, like that's very important, in particular because of the people and the families that you're showing in this film, that you do have to present and make sure that you present them in an empathetic way, so that the audience doesn't, I think, in a way, look at them with any preconceived ideas, about not only these people, but I think also about Irish culture in particular, and the way that Irish people look at in the film talks about Christmas, but also look at Christmas, but also family as well.
It's a really good point you make. And going back to why I became a filmmaker, or I stuck with it, I was obviously in a class with lots of cinephiles, people who had grown up in love with cinema, and their whole dream to exist almost was to become a filmmaker and a director. And so I never lived that dream. So I always thought I was at a disadvantage really at film school, because I didn't have that natural film language. I had to learn it. And I didn't have that acumen and that intelligence. But what I did have was, because I was a mature student and I came in with a lot of baggage and a lot of life experience, and I always describe myself as an emotional filmmaker as opposed to an intelligent filmmaker. And I let my heart direct me and tell me, or direct me towards the stories to tell. And I'm from a very small town in the middle of nowhere in Ireland with ordinary people, but those people have enriched my life. They're part of who I am and where I came from, and they're the people I find I'm most comfortable around, and so forth. So I'm always drawn back into that world. So I think, if anything, I I think it's just that empathetic nature that I have that actually propelled me into documentary making and kept me there and gave me a reason and a purpose to exist, because I think I would have faded into the background amongst all these other great filmmakers. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm a great filmmaker, but I've managed to make some sort of a career out of it, at least. I've managed to kind of have my films stand out in the context of really the types of films that they are, and no one else really is choosing to make them. And one of the things, and I find quite a lot about when I go out to research and cast my types of films, I get this asked a lot, is like, why would you be interested in me? Because people, you know, I've not achieved anything, or I've not done anything major, or I've not done a crime, or, you know, I just exist, or I'm just an ordinary person. And I'm just fascinated in the ordinary, you know. It's just like I try to extract something compelling out of that, and relatable and universal.
Well, so two things you said, they're interesting. The first one thing I want to touch on is you said that you see yourself as an emotional filmmaker, not as an intelligent one. But the thing is, I think that's kind of being doing a disservice to yourself, because you need to have emotional intelligence to be an emotional filmmaker and to be an emotional storyteller. And intelligence comes from emotions, because intelligence, and this is whether it's like book smarts or whatever, you have to have some sense of connection to this thing that you're being intelligent about. For instance, like mathematicians, they could be mathematical geniuses, but they have to have an emotional connection to the math, to want to be curious about it, you know, to want to explore about it. If you want to be a physicist, you have to have an emotional connection to physics, to say, I want to explore this thing that I feel an emotional connection to. For a filmmaker, like you, if you are, as a documentarian, as someone who's telling the story about ordinary people, you have to have an emotional connection to these people to the stories that you're telling. Even if you don't know them, you still have to be emotional enough that you care and that you want to tell their stories and you want to be honest and truthful about it. So I wouldn't say that you don't have to disconnect emotional from the intelligent, you know, because they go hand in hand. And I'm kind of like the similar, like I didn't go to school to be a journalist. I didn't go to school to be a film critic or anything. I went to school to be a paralegal. I come from a whole bunch of doing a whole bunch of jobs. I've been a barista, I've been a legal secretary, I've been a receptionist, you know, I've been a nanny, both private as well as working at a daycare nursery. I'm from the Caribbean. I went to secondary school and I didn't go to university. I have a college diploma, but I didn't go to university, you know, but I think I have a world intelligence because of all the different things that I've done and all the things that I've experienced. It gives me an insight into the world and into experiences and the people. And that helps me to look at film differently, you know, than other people who don't have the same experiences that I do. So like to say that, oh, like, I mean, emotional, but I'm not intelligent, I would say like, don't sell yourself short, you know?
Well, I'll take that. And I do understand, of course, where you're coming from there. And an emotional intelligence is something, thankfully, that my mum and my dad gave me. And I milk it because I do believe that I have that, if nothing else. And I suppose going back to that, it is just when you get caught up in film school, it becomes quite technical. And how you move the camera and why you motivate this camera move and so forth. I would get confused in all of that. So I think if you look at my films, they're quite simplistic in their form. But as you say, they go beyond the form into an emotional space, hopefully, please goodness, and they go beyond that. And I obviously respect that, and I admire that, but I kind of put it to one side and I just do my thing and let the heart, the emotion, hopefully a bit of humor along the way take over and let that speak for itself as opposed to the technique and the filmmaking language and all of that. Anyway, look, I'll leave that to the audiences to work out if they agree with it.
Yeah, and then the second thing I wanted to talk about that you had said at first, where I use a quotation of ordinary is like we look at ourselves as ordinary people because we're not actors or we're not celebrities or whatever, and we kind of say ordinary people, and we are, and the film is very much about ordinary people, and it's about 5 families in particular, and who the way how they see Christmas and the way they connect to Christmas. And I think there's celebrations and there's so many things that I think I touched on in this film, and it's not that things that you intended, but it's things that they say. And I think it really shows how ordinary people are all very emotionally mature and very self-aware. I think everyone in this film, the subjects are all extremely self-aware people. They know exactly who they are. They know their situation, and they have a very particular and very specific outlook on life, and they know why they do these things. And the thing is, like, with this film is like it's showing how Christmas, using Christmas as an example, but I think you could set it. You know what? No, I don't think it could be about any other holiday specifically, because Christmas is one holiday that has started out as one thing, a religious, in a sense, religious celebration in a way about, you know, recognizing the birth of Jesus, but then it's become extremely commercialized. And because of that, it's put so much pressure on people all around the world, whether they're religious or not, whether they believe in Jesus or not, to celebrate this one event. And the film really does touch on like how people, because of the lives and the experiences they had from childhood through like the trauma and different traumas they experienced, and the way they see this one particular aspect of this holiday really, I think, kind of reflects on how as society, we don't really take care of people, especially around the time where you're supposed to really care about each other. And I think that's something that this film really does highlight, especially because it talks about loneliness, it talks about grief, loss, and financial hardships, but also I think mental health and physical health and all that. And we'll get into that. But the first thing that I think that really shows like where you are kind of like telling the audience like about how we have very preconceived notions of Christmas in particular is you started out with a quintessential white Christmas opening, you know, like the field, it's a farmland, the trees are covered in white, it's all nice and pretty and pristine. You have the two horses running in the paddock, and the kids are at the church, and like the vicar, it would be a vicar, right? Would he be a vicar or a pastor? I know like there's a term vicar, but
he's a Roman Catholic priest.
He's a Roman Catholic priest. Okay, I wasn't sure. I know Vicar because I used to watch the Vicar Dibley back in the day, and I love that show.
We've got Vicar here as well, but this particular one, this gentleman was a Catholic priest.
Oh, okay. But he's like talking about, you know, setting up for Christmas and stuff, and the kids are like, "What does Christmas have to do with Jesus?" And he's like, "Well, you know, I have to come back to you." But then he's like stumbling with an answer. Right?
What has Christmas got to do with Santa?
With Santa, right? But I said Jesus. Sorry, yes, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But and then he's like stumbling with an answer. He's like, "Oh, you know, it's all about generosity and stuff." And it's interesting because you would think the film is going to be, you almost forget that it's meant to be a documentary because it opens up like a film. Like it's going to be like a Christmas film, you know, something like a classic Christmas holiday film. And it kind of made me think almost like Love Actually. And there's a scene where a guy is singing in a recording studio. I'm like, he reminds me of Bill Nighy in that scene from Love Actually. That's what it was supposed to be, like a callback to that.
It was inspired by Bill Nighy. Exactly. I said, we have to do our version because we found that wonderful gentleman. That's his own song that he had recorded and everything. And we were looking for these little inserts and postcards around. And then when we found him, I said, "Oh my goodness, he reminds me of Bill Nighy in Love Actually." Well spotted, Carolyn.
I laughed and I was like, but like the film starts and it kind of gives that idea, you know, like the Christmas carols, the like people shopping, everyone is happy. But then that you switch the tone and you realize, oh wait, this is a documentary, and it's a documentary about how people see Christmas. Before we get into the actual thing, talk to me about setting up the film that way, about setting it up with the idea that we've been fed about what Christmas is. Because even coming from the Caribbean myself, where we don't have snow, we still, like, part of my Christmas tradition growing up was watching Christmas movies. As a lot of them were Lifetime and American movies and like European films where Christmas is white. Christmas, you're supposed to have a white Christmas where it's covered in snow. I'm in the Caribbean, but I think Christmas is supposed to have snow. So talk about like setting up the whole commercialized idea of what Christmas is.
Yeah, I suppose I have to go back to what kind of inspired it to get there. Because, okay, so when I was a kid so I was 12 years of age, and unfortunately my gran, who was living with us, passed away on Christmas Day. And My little brother and I were opening our Christmas presents. It was really early. Mum was down in the kitchen and Gran was in bed. And Mum was like, will someone go and ask Granny what she wants for breakfast? So my little brother ran in, and she unfortunately was going at that point. She was having an attack. So that kind of changed Christmas forevermore. You know, it was such a, you know, at 11, it was the end of Christmas as we know it. How we all know it can take a different form once, you know, you get to a certain age. But that really was a bookmark or chapter mark in what Christmas meant thereafter, because it became a really sad time of year for quite a few years, because my mum and my gran were very, very close. So changed Christmas. So every time Christmas would come around, we would see these kind of quintessential Christmas films, or we would be brought to the Christmas Carol service, or we would be brought to the different Christmas fairs. It was always tinged with a sort of sadness. And I always thought, even at 12, I was like, there's more going on around this time than this jolliness, this fakeness. When I see my mom is crying into, we used to have clothes over our fireplace that we would kind of air the clothes, and my mum would, a vision of mum on Christmas morning was crying into the clothes there because she was missing her mum, and it just tainted Christmas. So I always had this sort of two sides of Christmas, the ones that we were being sold and the one that was the reality, and that's from an early age, you know. So then when this film came around, I did want to kind of juxtapose. I'm getting up.
I know it is.
Thank you very much, because that could have lasted all night, that one. Juxtapose the image that we all are told to aspire to, or the perfect idea of Christmas, which is, as you say, the white Christmas. It is the priest giving a lovely message of generosity and kindness, and our neighbors singing Christmas carols at our door, and, you know, all of this lark, which is not the reality for the vast majority of people. You know, for most people, it's just another day in the year that is actually can be, as we all know, far more complicated, because you have more expenses. You're reminded of the people that aren't around you anymore. You're reminded of your mental health. If you are lonely, you're reminded that you're lonelier now, because you look out the window, or, you know, you see in the movies or hear on the radio that people are getting together, and you're not going to be getting together with people. So it accentuates everything. And I just wanted to sort of, you know, show the happy and the reality against each other. And as a filmmaker, and I have to say, this is, you know, obviously I went out to find stories, and I was so moved by all of the characters that I got to film with, and their lives and their stories. And I love humor. I always am seeking out humor in my storytelling, because I think it ultimately draws people in. It warms an audience up to characters and so forth. So I knew I was dealing with difficult subjects, so I was going to have to find that humor elsewhere on this occasion. And that's where I came up with this idea of postcards of Christmas. And it actually was, I called it my Advent scenes. So they're meant to work as Advent calendars. And originally, in the very first pass of a treatment for the film, I had it being counted down to Christmas. And you'd almost open the little curtain into that day, be it the first day of Advent, and then you'd move on from there. So sequentially, the stories, or those scenes, were sort of originally choreographed around the time of year it would be, as in the turkeys would start to be plucked, and then, you know, the carol singers would be practicing for the carols around now. So I veered away from just that obvious structure in the edit, but originally these little scenes were Advent scenes, and those Advent scenes were going to be the kind of side that doesn't really exist for everybody.
Yeah, no, they do, because those things, they kind of just really only exist in the film. Because I remember when my sister and I moved to Canada, we moved in 2009. We moved in November. It was cold and it was wet and rainy. There was no snow. Christmas came and there was no snow. And I remember I said, I feel bamboozled. Where's the snow? You know, I'm like, I'm in North America now. I'm like, I'm supposed to have snow. And I really was bummed. I remember my dad took us to a friend of his house, because a traditional thing for West Indian people is, for Christmas, you have during the early in the day, you spend it with your family, and then like usually in the evening, you would go around to like your friend's house, like for dinner or a party or whatever. And so like that evening, he took us to a friend's house, and like everyone was inside like talking and like playing dominoes or whatever. And I was outside looking for the snow, and there was no snow, and I felt like bamboozled. So like I just said like that was, and I realized, wow, like a TV lies. I'm like, really, I'm like, Hollywood really has bamboozled us into like believing Christmas is this very pristine and clean and perfect time, but it's not. And the film really gets into that. And like, even when people manage to get up the decorations, the trees, when they feel because like some of them, like they feel like they're obligated to put up the Christmas tree, and they have to put up the decorations. And like for many people, they like putting up the decorations and everything is part and parcel for it, because that's the experience, that's how we've been told, that's what we've been sold to believe Christmas is. And like, yes, you get genuine joy and fulfillment out of the lights. I love seeing the decorations too, but then for people who live alone, like one of them is a lady, she lives alone, she just has like a little tree and she puts it up and she's like, oh, I'm done. And then there's another cat, and then there's another person, he again lives alone with just his little dog, and he puts like a menorah at the window, like the lights. And like, I thought it was actually really pretty, because when you shoot it from outside and you have the curtain backing it, it looks actually really pretty, simple and pretty. But like, he was like, okay, I'm done now. That's my decoration. And then you have the people who live with their parents, who live with their children, the two parents, the mom and the dad, who live with their own children. And they feel obligated to make sure that everything is as pretty as possible for their children, because like, to give them the good memories. But the film really does touch on how much pressure that puts on people, where if they're not doing it, they feel like they're not good enough, that they're not socially doing the social thing, they're not doing what society expects of them. And I think, and so I want us to in talking about the characters, the people, I want us to start there, because the film, I think, really does talk about how Christmas, it has become a form of pressure for people. It's a stress. It's something that's stressed. Not like they worry year round financially, but because it's so commercialized now, they feel they have to spend more money than they have. And if they don't have that money, then they're failing. If they don't have the decorations, they're failing. If they don't have a family, they're a failure. And like, there's one of them, a lady who is anorexic. She has an eating disorder, and is in particular, is very stressful for her because of her relation to food. And her family not understanding that relation to food and how that is traumatic for her. And she feels she has to perform for them. So I want us to first talk about how Christmas itself has become a form of pressure and stress for people.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Carolyn, you've summed up that very well. I think Christmas for me, okay, going back to the obvious reasons why I had a complicated Christmas, there is another reason, and that is because I have a niece who is a single mom with 2 children, and during the summer time she starts saving for Christmas. It's a Christmas saving scheme or something, yeah. But by October, November, she has to break into that just because she's running short. And then we have this sort of drama that unfolds, and the pressure, and it is just horrendous, the amount of pressure that she puts on herself for her 2 boys, because she wants them to have everything that they see their friends in a normal family having, and she is a struggling mom, keeps down a job as best she can, but cannot afford the 8-foot fresh Christmas tree. She has to pull the plastic one out of the attic, and she knows it'll go over in the corner, and she'll use the old decorations that she's had for ever, and so forth. But as I said to her in this, because I would be, I'm a single gay man without children, and I'm like, do you know what, Zoe, when you sit down on Christmas Day, your 2 boys you'll be rolled up on a couch with them, and that's what matters. You're being hugged by your 2 kids, watching, It's a Wonderful Life, and I, who probably have the bigger Christmas tree, to be honest, and have the, will be there on my own with my 2 dogs. So, we all lose perspective of what is important, but each of the characters in this film, I think they have try to find perspective, and they really are doing a good job, but continuously come up against brick walls because of other things, the outside world that is kind of imposing issues and problems on them. And, you know, if they could just get along and just mind their own business and just avoid the rest of the world and keep the television off, probably they could probably, well, they get through it, you know, but they struggle through it, and they all do their very best. And I have to say, they've all come out the other side of Christmas and this Christmas, because we shot it the Christmas before. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, because I'm sure everybody that's listening relates to it, because we've all had Christmases that are just suck. You know, we haven't discussed the family arguments and the problems that emerge around, you know. So as I said, I was just throwing some light on this. And if we were to talk about each of those characters individually, I think it would be, you know, what's the word? I think we would discover an inner strength that makes them survive it all and push through. And actually, in real terms, it is only a blip in the year, but it's just a really annoying blip that's not, especially when things are stacked against you.
It's and like what you were saying, like for your niece and her son children, they honestly, what the things they will remember is more the time that she spends with them than the gifts. All of the memories that I have for Christmas, I don't really remember any of the gifts I got. Some of them I do remember. It was like the Bop It kind of game. But most of the memories that I do have were like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning with my mom, prepping the cooking, you know, spending that time in the kitchen, prepping for Christmas lunch. Because in Barbados, what we do, you get up early, prepare the food, and then you get ready for church. You go to church for like 6 a.m. service, and like spend like 2-3 hours at church. Come back, finish, like you put the ham or whatever in the oven, put the macaroni pie and the rice and everything on the stove, whatever. My brother would go off into the park and play football with his friends, you know. And but these are the things I remember. And like after we eat and everything, we would sit down and watch TV for the entire day, because that was like one of the traditions that because my family has always loved watching movies. We sit down, we'd watch the 10 Commandments, you know, the one with Charlton Heston. You'd like every Christmas watch the 10 Commandments and a whole bunch of other movies about like Samson and like a whole bunch of Bible movies. But then you'd put on like other like one of the things my brother would do, we'd go to the video store, RIP video stores, they don't have them anymore. Go to the video store, and he would take me and my twin sister and we would each get to select. I think, yeah, because for Christmas you would get to rent 10 tapes. That was a Christmas special. You get to rent 10 VHS tapes. So we each get like 2 or 3 videos to select. And for the entire day, that's all we did. After eating, watched videotapes, watched movies. That's what I remember. I don't remember the toys. So like for like you were saying, like for like that you have to tell people, don't put so much pressure on the monetary things, because the things that you remember is not even connected to money per se. You know, and in the film, it really gets into that. Like in the 2 families in particular, there's the mom with her 3 kids. She's raising the kids by herself. And then there's the dad, his wife, Roxy, has passed on. So it's just him and the two boys. And I wanted, like, when they were talking about the gifts and for the mom, she's so worried about like financially, like she doesn't have money. She's like, what can I buy them? And I wanted to say, trust me, the things your kids will remember is you playing at the tree with them. You know, the things your kids are going to remember is like preparing, like the dad teaching the kids the Christmas meal that his wife made sure to teach him before she died. That's what his kids are going to remember. They're not really going to remember the toys, because the toys come and go, they break, you know, they age out, you stop, the batteries die and you stop playing with them, you know. But and so I think that's one of the things the film really does touch on, is like at the end of the day, whether it's Christmas or not, the things that people will remember is spending time with you, you know, and like being there with you. So talk to me about the discussions you had with these 5 characters in making the film and like in selecting them, because as I said at the beginning, I think they're all very emotionally and very intelligent people, and also very self-aware, intelligent people. And I thought it was interesting we didn't get any names for them. Like there's no intro cards to say the names of them. Like And I thought at first it was like, but why? We don't know who these are. But then I was thinking, but these represent everyday people, you know, like we don't need to name them because they're literally our neighbors. They could be people we're in our building, people that we work with, people we see on the bus.
That's exactly it, Carolyn. I just wanted them to represent us all because we're all in it in that sense together, and especially at Christmas. Finding characters for films like this, it's complicated, you know, because you're dealing with issues. So in a way, we always start at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. So we go to organizations and agencies that work in this space, be it with grief or mental health, eating disorders and so forth, and they give us great advice but rarely lead us to the characters because, you know, of different GDPR rules and stuff that we have. So we get the advice, and then we get the just some indication as to where we might go looking, and then we reach out. But I'm a real believer in sticking to particular areas. So these people all come from within a catchment area in Ireland, in the Irish Midlands, because I wanted to feel like it represented a little town and that everybody could be from the same town. Now, they happen to be from a few different towns, but very similar areas. So then we just literally walked around towns, and we were on Facebook a bit because to find someone that was living a reclusive life, for example, with our Annette character who lives alone. We found Annette via Facebook, but that's the only person that way. Otherwise, it was word of mouth. We were walking around asking in shops, do people know any stories that might be pertinent at Christmas or people's lives? And we found, I'd say, you know, I suppose I would have met 20 or 30 people in the process personally. Now, I would have had a team of researchers working on it. They would have met more people. And then it's just when you have a sort of personal connection with someone, you just get a vibe that this person is very authentic and real and understands the mission of the film. Gets on with me because I've become friends with all of them, to be honest. They're all good friends now. We stay in contact. And that's always important to me, that there's some sort of chemistry between us, that they understand me as a person. I obviously share my own scenarios and stories and my emotional connections with this time of year and their own stories, be it grief or mental health, for example. You know, we've all been on those journeys. So it's just something that all 5 of these people just clicked, and it's hard to explain that. It's just, you know, when it's right. And I was looking for 5 people. In fact, I did have a 6th person, but unfortunately their story changed just prior to Christmas and they had to drop out. But it's the first time I've made a film where I didn't have a safety measure, as in, like, if someone pulled out during the filming process, I would have enough. So I really needed everybody to keep on this journey. Fortunately, there was a finite, we were only filming up till Christmas Day. So, you know, it wasn't a huge commitment. I think we started in the middle of November. I cheated for Christmas. By the way, just like you guys, we're not always guaranteed of snow, but we happened to get, what you saw is not snow. It's this deep, deep frost that looked like snow. So it worked magically, but there was actually no snow, but we had frost for a week, which looked exactly like snow here in Ireland.
And you were like, yes. We lucked out.
Let's milk this. Let's get going. So we worked extra hard that week. But yeah, I feel very fortunate to have found those 5 characters and shared in their experiences, met their families. You know, they were very personal, very open during this film. And, you know, I think they've all gone through a cathartic experience because of it. To share it out loud, it's kind of freeing for them. And, you know, they're all still on a journey, but thankfully, you know, things are looking okay for everybody, you know, as well as it can be. And as I said, they've got through a second Christmas since we filmed. So that's good. And, yeah, I mean, it's lovely to even hear your reaction and your take on their stories, because it seems as if you understood where we were headed with it, like that they were representing everybody in a way that it's a familiar story. Because one of the things, as a filmmaker, you go out with some sense of purpose, and I would love to think that people watching this film might go knock on a neighbor's door around Christmas time, or find an older person to say hello to, or wish them a happy Christmas, bring a smile to someone's face, because that's what Christmas is about. As you started off in this discussion talking about that it's a time of year when we should be getting together, sharing with people, and it's not about the commercialization. It's not about the big Apple products or the Amazon deliveries, and it is something far more precious, and that's people. And it's been a real privilege to go on this journey, it has to be said.
Yeah, no, and I think and I appreciate that you would give them that space, because like I always say, especially for documentaries, it's important for the directors. Like I mentioned empathy before, but there's not only empathy, but it's also patience, because you have to give them time to really get to where they're comfortable talking about the stories that they want to share, and like giving them the space to like be open, especially like Annette in particular. There's her, and then there's another, the other female solo character. What's her name?
Mary.
Right. So like Annette and Mary in particular, like they're very fascinating to me, because Annette, she's an older woman and she lives alone, and this is by choice. Both her and Mary live alone by choice, but they're living alone by choice for very different reasons. And like again, like the film is showing like everyone's situation is different, and like there are things in our past, and like even in our present, affects the way we see the world and the choices people make. And one of these things is living alone and being alone at Christmas, and how that pressure builds up. But like for Annette in particular, I think she's extremely self-aware and a very extremely emotionally intelligent person. And the way I say that is because she knows exactly why she's alone, and she talks about the difference between being alone and lonely. And she talks about being fine being alone, because she knows that the reason she is because of trauma that she went through. Like she was abused in school, she was bullied in school, and like she said, she hated every day of school because she didn't have anyone that was looking after her. She was a student, she was a child, she was being bullied, but no one stepped in to protect her. She didn't have to say, but you understood that that's what she meant, and she very readily admits like she has trust issues, and she knows this, she's not in denial about that at all. And I think that's actually that's why she's very self-aware, very emotionally intelligent, because there'll be people who don't admit those things out loud, and let alone to a camera in a film that they know other people are going to show, and she, but it shows that I think she's content with her life, like she's like, this is my life and I'm going to live it the way I want, and I'm not going to let anyone tell me anything different. And people might look on her with pity and say, oh, she's all alone and that thing, but I don't think she's anyone to be pitied, because there'll be people who are surrounded by people, and they are more lonely than she is. And then there's Mary. Mary is she's alone, and I think the reason she's alone is she has family that she spends time with, but I mentioned earlier, her family doesn't understand her relationship to food, and that puts pressure on her. So she looks at, and she has again, she doesn't say, but if you're aware of what the symptoms look like, I think she has like social anxiety. And like Christmas is a time of anxiety and extreme stress for her, because she has to perform for people. She has to be around people and put on the happy, excited, I want to be around people, and like people are serving foods that she can't eat because again, the relationship she has with food, and no one is being considerate of that. And then she goes to buy things. I know that she buys a lot of things in this film, like a lot of her scenes are her going shopping a lot, but it shows that she again cares about the people in her lives, and she loves them, and she's doing these things for them. But then in my head I was thinking about who's doing things for Mary, because like every time she goes somewhere, people asking, are you prepared for the family? And like she's giving them the expected response, the socially acceptable response. But in my head I'm thinking, oh Lord, she's dreading going around these people. Like, stop asking Mary about what she's going to do for Christmas. Stop asking her that. So like, talk to me about Annette and Mary.
Well spotted. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head with both of these people. I mean, Annette is just so confident in her own self and very happy in her scenario to a point. I mean, obviously things could be better, but equally, she doesn't want pity. She wants to be respected and understood and just let be. So you've really understood that. And with Mary, I think the interesting thing you said about the social anxiety, because that was one of the type of characters we wanted to find, but we didn't quite find that person, and yet Mary probably represents that person. I didn't expect that because I wouldn't have had prior knowledge to an eating disorder, and I learned a lot from Mary during the process and understood how complicated that makes just a normal life, as you say, everywhere you go at Christmas time. This is commonplace. You're asked, oh, what are you doing for Christmas? Or, and then of course you give what they expect will be the happy answer. You're not going to actually say the reality is, I'm going to be hiding in my bedroom and trying to avoid Christmas dinner because I'm, suffer from an eating disorder. You're not going to say that. But actually, and I go back to this film being a cathartic experience, this has afforded her an opportunity to actually say, look at me, this is what I have to put up with. Yeah. And sharing it here on camera is probably her opportunity, as with Annette, saying, look, people come in all shapes and sizes, in different mental health scenarios, and come in different sort of outlooks. And Christmas is this, but don't expect us all to get into that box with you. Allow some people room to maneuver and outside it, and not put us under pressure to join the club. And we all, so I think they represent two incredibly strong women who battle against the odds of what is expected and what a society expects of them, and are battling through against the odds, to be honest. And sometimes they've got good days and sometimes they've got bad days. And I think we saw that in the film. And I think also, I don't want to paint a picture of all doom and gloom, because I'll tell you one thing, Annette is quite a funny lady and has some scathing remarks, I think, in the film as well, that brings a little smile to your face at times.
No, she is. I think one thing I've noticed about all 5 of the main characters is they all say something very specific, if you're paying attention, something very critical of society and social expectations. Like Annette, she talks about the commercialization of Christmas, and you might lose it in what she's saying, but if you're paying attention to what she's saying, she's talking about it's all a facade, it's all what is the point of all of this? And for Mary, again, she's talking about how, again, people expect others to perform for them, but again, I think that she gives it in a very subtle but in a very critical way. If you're paying attention to what she's saying, she's talking about being expected to perform for people, and people not paying attention to her, again, because she's thin and she's pretty, so people think that's all there is to her, and she's like, but there's more than this to me, I have struggles too. And then there's the mom, the single mom. She talks about being financially insecure. She talks about the worry of being able to buy food for her children and having to go to the food bank. But there's something that she says there in the film that it was like, aha. She talks about alcoholism, and she talks about the struggle with alcoholism, and how Christmas was a trigger for her, and how she had to learn to basically quit drinking for her own well-being. And again, this is something that's unexpected. There's unexpected things that they reveal. And again, it's talking again about social expectations, where Christmas is supposed to be all happy and a time for family and communion and all this stuff. But it's also a time, yes, emotional stress, but it's also a time where drinking habits like drinking are socially acceptable. Whereas you're thinking, actually, it's not, because this is a sign of alcoholism. And she talks about that, she talks about how she would get drunk. And there's scenes that you insert, the postcards you mentioned, where someone is in a pub and they come up puking. And that kind of stuff will be celebrated. You're in the club, you're in the pub celebrating drinking and all this stuff. But outside the pub, someone is throwing up. They're sick to their stomachs. And what part of that is celebration? And she talks about it, she talks about, I had to stop because I was losing weight. And people weren't checking on her that way, but she's drinking, which is socially acceptable. She's like, but this is a problem, so this is, again, something else that the film really does highlight, socially acceptable behaviors that really shouldn't be.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think with all the stories, I tried to have a second layer to their story to show again that there's many dimensions to everybody's scenario. And Christmas, in Loretta's case, for example, not only is it financial, but if you have another side, it can also impact. And let's face it, alcoholism at Christmas, it's just right. I mean, God help people cope with an addiction at Christmas time, because it's in your face everywhere you go, and the pressure that you come under to have a glass. Oh, you will. I mean, we're great in Ireland for this. It's like almost like, what's wrong with you if you're not having a drink? You must be pregnant, or you must be sick, or So I think Loretta represented another very, very familiar story to so many people, that we're not only struggling with one issue, but there can be other issues. And I mean, talk about someone that's rised above it all. And I think at the end of the day, when you talk about someone who hasn't, who is struggling financially, has battled and won the addiction battle, well, I'd say winning, because you're never properly over it. But at the end of the film, my God, I think she, shows us the importance, as she says herself, is being with those kids and having to share in a little dance, or they are the things that their kids will recount when they go to sleep that night, is like, thank you, Mum, for giving us that time. And it's not about the presents, as you point out. And I think I learned so much from Loretta again. I mean, just being in the presence of that woman and that family. I mean, the three kids, she has done a wonderful job as her father, because it's a three-way story, obviously. And sorry, it's a two-way story here, and we were representing one side of it. So yeah, I mean, sorry, I could go on for hours on these subjects because they're all multi-layered.
Yeah, and there's one of the other characters. So I mentioned the single dad before, but there's another gentleman who's another focal point. He was interesting to me because he, again, like Annette and Mary, lives alone, but I get the sense there's a scene where he's with someone. I'm like, I don't think that's his sister. I got the sense more that she's like a social worker. And he's interesting because he's very happy-go-lucky. Like he's well known by everyone in the town he lives in. He's very adaptable. Like there's a scene where he's waiting for a car to see if he could hitchhike it right to the work site where he's working. He's like, oh, car doesn't come, walk across this massive field to go and get to where I need to go. And he's like, you know what, if this is what happens, this is what I need to do. He's very adaptable that way. And he's the one that put the menorah up in the window, which I thought was so pretty. But something that I thought was interesting was just like a glimpse. And he's older, he's probably in his late 50s, and he's writing, but he's struggling to write, and he clearly has a learning disability. And again, this is a point where he again is that he's performing the socially acceptable thing, which is sending Christmas cards. And this is a challenge for him, because he can't really write, and he's doing this, but he also doesn't have much money. But he's also like he's like, I have a god nephew now, and so I'm gonna get a toy for him. And he's like already planning like 18 years into the future, like doing activities with this godson. So I would talk a bit about him because I thought he was very interesting. He's also like very funny as well. Irish people do have a very self-deprecating and also very cynical and very biting wit. And and like I'm from the Caribbean, so it's very similar. Like we have very similar, I think.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's Shane, and he is someone we found. You're dead right. Everybody in that town knows Shane. I have never been in the company of any other human being who has had so many horns beeped at them, waved. I mean, he is just, everybody knows him in the town, and he is happy-go-lucky. He is someone that has so little and yet so much. I mean, he finds positivity, optimism in everything, and he has a very simple life. He unfortunately lost his mum and his dad, and they would have been so precious to him. And I think potentially that was the change in factor in his life that meant that he ended up being living on his own in the middle of nowhere, doesn't drive, has had he was unfortunately went to an old fashioned Irish school, I suppose, that really didn't have much time or care for people with learning disabilities. And he was just left behind and forgotten about. So the thing about Shane is he is someone that will soldier on. So he found a way to go back to adult education and is trying to learn how to read and write so he can actually pass his driving tests so that he doesn't have to rely on people stopping to give him a lift, that he'll be able to drive. But for him, Christmas comes and goes, and I suppose all has changed since Mum and Dad left. But he tries to find a little bit of magic in that world, and this grand nephew of his is one of those opportunities, and he can focus a little bit of love and attention in that. And I suppose for him, just sharing, I mean, he's again just being in his presence. As I said, he's so little, but he would give everything away if he could. It brings him joy and happiness. So Christmas to him is about giving, not about receiving. It is literally going about trying to work out what he can do for someone. And he represented someone without, like the other four characters had obvious problems. They could be defined and articulated. With Shane, it's not like he was struggling because he was happy-go-lucky. And it was more like I'd hope to represent someone that people might feel sorry for, but actually because they're absolutely happy. Again, put them under any pressure. He is very happy in his own company, gets on with life, shares the laughs and the giggles. As long as he gets his wiki, by the way, I don't know if you noticed that, but he says wiki every time he goes into a bar, which is not whiskey. It's a strange blue drink called a Wicked. I'm not sure if you have it over in Canada, but
is it? Let me see. There's a blue drink and it's called what? Absinthe? Is it? It's not absinthe, right?
Absinthe. It's like a Coke. This is like an alcohol pop. It's like something, like it's strange. I've never seen anyone drink it before. But anyway,
I don't drink alcohol at all. I'm like Annette. I hate the taste of alcohol. When she said like she had the taste of gin and she was like never again. I'm like, I'm with you, Annette. You and I are the same that way. I hate the taste of alcohol, but I don't know like different alcoholic drinks and stuff. But maybe they might sell it in bars, but it might be just specific to Ireland, or maybe just his own concoction, kind of.
Thankfully, he wasn't saying a particular brand because people thought Wiki was whiskey. We're famous for our Irish whiskey, so it kind of helped us in the film. But anyway, he is, and he lives a very rural life, and like so many Irish men, bachelors that are left to their own devices in many respects out in rural Ireland. And he used to walk, as you know from the film, he would walk to work 4 or 5 kilometers. So I met him there recently, and we had dinner together in a hotel in the town. And he introduced me and he said, "You'll have to meet this guy, Michael. He's fabulous and you'd love to make another film about him." So he introduced me to Michael, and Michael had cycled 2 hours to the hotel to have a cup of tea and cake. He lived, and I was like, and this man is in his late 60s. And I was like, you have to cycle home for 2 hours. And he was like, yes. And and this is just, as I said, these people exist, and he has no television, and when he heard I was a filmmaker, he said, "Oh my God, do you know Michael Fassbender?" And I was like, "No, but I've heard of him, obviously. And tell me, is Daniel Day-Lewis as good as they say?" And I was like, "Well, he's a fine actor." And I said, "Michael, do you watch films?" And he said, "Oh, no, I have no television." And I was like, "So how do you know all this?" And he said, "Oh, I just hear it from the radio." So he'd never seen a movie. And he knew all about these actors and everything just from listening on the radio. So his imagination was just so wonderful. Like, I was like, I could have spoken to him for hours. But he sat opposite Shane, and I'm sure on other occasions they sat opposite each other in that when they didn't have a filmmaker between them. And I'd just love to be privy to that conversation between their lives as just single men going through life without, much family and, much interaction beyond these random meets every so often. I just found it all very fascinating anyway.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Shane is fascinating because it's just him and his dog, and I'm just like, oh, he's happy, he's like, he's living his life, and he says it in the films, like Christmas is just another day for him. you know. But he recognizes and acknowledges that it's some more, that it's not just another day for other people, and that's fine to him too, you know. He's just like, he's like, just another day, but it's not for people, so like, I'm gonna get a toy for my grandnephew because this matters, you know, like this matters to them and it says better, so I'm gonna do it. But he didn't feel any pressure to do it because he was happy, you know. He's just like, he's so happy. And then like, so we're gonna wrap it up, but the last one I'm going to talk about is, of course, the last character, who's the single dad who lost his wife. His wife died. And another thing that I really appreciated about this film, yes, you give us very well-rounded characters, but especially for the male characters, for Shane and for the dad, like, they're all very empathetic and very caring men. But I love that we got to see him be friends with his sons and like be like physically emotional with them and physically open with them, you know, and like they're very affectionate to each other. And like you can tell like there's a lot of love and companionship with them, but he's not afraid to talk about his wife with the boys, you know, because sometimes that happens where a father, like whether it's a husband or wife or a spouse, like the spouse can lose their partner, and because like that trauma, that loss is still so fresh, they might not want to talk to them about like their children or to their family members, and they'd be like, I don't want to. But he's very open talking about her, you know. He doesn't want to not necessarily forget her, but he doesn't want to make the memory of her painful for them, you know. So he makes sure that he's like, if he's sad in the moment, he lets himself be sad, and if the boys are sad, he lets them be sad, and if they're happy, like that's like you embrace the happiness. So talk to me about him, because with him and with all of them, we see the happiness, we see the struggles, but I think it's also very important that we got to see the happy side, and we got to see these people be around people who appreciated them as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jason, we began this conversation talking about emotional intelligence, and I mean, Jason is just an extraordinary man, and it is rare. I shouldn't say it's rare, but obviously, and especially in Ireland, you know, men talking about their emotions and understanding and have that depth of emotional knowledge and, you know, willingness to express, and not just express to a filmmaker, which is difficult enough, but as you say, to his kids, which is actually more difficult and more, you know, complicated. How do you express that to such young children who've lost their mammy? Like, it's unimaginable. And I think Jason would be the first person to say that he was learning as he went. Like, this is just an unbelievable scenario that he's been faced with, but he faces it with such honesty and respect for the boys, and just integrity and emotional integrity and love. And I mean, it just comes from the heart with Jason. He speaks from the heart, and everything he does is from the heart. He would say he doesn't know if he's getting it right or wrong, but he just lets his heart dictates the moves that he makes, and that's what you see, and that's why, you know, on camera he is the way that he is. And again, and I know it's something I've said over and over, but you know, it was really a privilege and an honor to be in that man's presence, because we as a film crew, and I don't know if you spotted, but we were shooting on 35 millimeter.
35 millimeter and steady cam. I noticed there wasn't any handheld shots or anything. Like, it was all like tripod shot. You can tell it was tripod and steady cam.
Yeah. So with that so when Jason spoke to me to camera, there were 8 people there. It wasn't like a normally documentary crew where there might be a sound recordist, myself, and a camera person. There were 8 or 9 of us, and his house is small and it's so intimate. So he wasn't just sharing to me, he was sharing to another 8, you know, and we were primarily men on the set. So it was, you know, this is a man totally in tune with what is going on in his heart and the need to express it, and the freedom that gives you. And I suppose the kids are blessed to have a dad, like Jason, that can afford them this time to grieve, this time to, you know, understand and just compute what has been happened in their life. It beggars belief how they are all coping, because Roxy. I mean, talk about a true love story and a great mom and a great partner and such a loss. And we didn't get to meet Roxy, obviously, but we all just felt we knew her and that she was in our presence throughout the filming of this. So it was, I don't know what else to say about Jason other than we knew that Jason sharing this would be very, very important to the film and to people out there to know that, grief at Christmas and grief is, it's all around us at Christmas. There's no one that doesn't think about someone that's not present. I mean, it's, I think that's something I've learned over the years because we work in commercials and how sometimes it's always the empty seat that people are, the stories that we're chasing is normally around someone that's not present, because it's when memories start to emerge and when you realize what's missing as well, or who's missing at that table. So, yeah, by the way, I'm so sorry. I've just spotted my picture. I'm looking particularly pixel. It is getting dark in here. I could have. I'm not sure.
It was like, listen. If this was like something for a horror, you would swear there was something possessing this camera.
It suddenly went just really bad there. My apologies.
It's fine. It was a grainy, and then like the pictures of your grandma in the background just started to get like spookier. I was like, you know what? This is how horror movies are made.
Speaking of Christmas, one of my memories of Christmas is we would always have a Christmas church play, and then Santa would arrive at the end of it. But my grandmother would always, her Christmas present to us was to buy our outfits for Christmas party. And I always remember, like, about 4 or 5 months later, invariably I'd be wearing the same outfit on a Sunday or something when she came to visit, and she'd always go, "Oh, who bought you that lovely outfit?" And I was like, "You, Granny." "I didn't, did I? That's not the one." And I was like, "Yes, Granny." This went on forever, but those are the little memories around Christmas that we have, isn't it?
Exactly. So you might not remember exactly what the outfit is, but you remember those interactions with her giving you the gift and like the interactions we'd have after. So my last question for you now is, what was the biggest surprise for you, whether during filming or after filming, about making this film in particular?
Oh my goodness, that's a very good. I haven't been asked that, so I'm like thrown a little bit. What was the biggest surprise? What was the biggest surprise? Goodness gracious me. Well, I suppose the biggest surprise was that I don't actually know, but I guess getting a Christmas film programmed in the middle of spring. I thought no one would want to see this apart from like that little window of opportunity from about the 20th of November through to like the 5th of January, and then you put away Christmas and you go, I really don't want to see anything Christmassy again until next year. So maybe that's one of the surprises, that I got the opportunity to screen this film beyond Christmas.
Well, so I listen to Christmas music all year round anyway, so like, yeah, I do.
You're like that.
I listen to Christmas music anytime of the year.
Oh.
But I think for me watching the film, I think the biggest surprise for me in the film is one thing I do love about film is that film allows us to learn that we have so many things in common with different people around the world. It doesn't matter where you are. Like, for instance, like Annette talking about like how she hates alcohol. I'm like, yes. Same. So like for me like the film is like being able to see different things and connect with people. Like for instance, Shane, I'm dyslexic, so I also have a learning disability as well, right? So like learning writing and learning to read and all that was a struggle for me as I'm growing up. That's the thing for me that I love about films, especially documentaries, is being able to watch films about people all over the world in places that I've never been and seeing things that I have in connection in common, right? Things that I might have in common with them, but also getting to learn about different people in different places and getting just these little glimpses, snippets into like life in Ireland, you know, like what life is like for people in Ireland.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of looking at it, because there are so many similarities between us all, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
As you said again at the start of this conversation, we all have the same image of the perfect Christmas, and you kind of forget that as well, that even though you may be from Barbados, our Christmases, let's face it, our Santa Claus is a Coca-Cola Santa Claus.
Right.
I mean, nothing like, yeah, but that is our image of Christmas, and so that is always lovely to what's the word, to be surprised that people connect with your film, even though it's a small town in Ireland. People see similarities in the characters, in the scenarios play out, and the problems that we all share. And you know, Christmas is something that we do share, let's face it, across the world. And the meaning of Christmas has been lost, and we all know that. And we, you know what? That battle has been lost. I don't think we'll ever recover. It has gone into this dark side of commercialization, but it's just nice to have a little reminder of what it was about and what it should be about every so often. So if I've done something with this film, I hope it's just triggered that in people.
Yeah, I think so, because it's about basically reminding people to get back to what it is about, even if you're not Christian. Like, it's supposed to be a time dedicated in the year to spending time with people, you know, like where you may have been separated for the entire year, but you're at least like, for Christmas, this is actually just the time to like dedicate to spending time to each other, you know, like no matter what happens, we're gonna come together, have dinner with it. But it's also about like, again, in speaking about Annette and Shane and Mary, also respecting people's boundaries and what they want to and what they don't want to do. So I think that's what it should be about, to just respecting, like, love and care and togetherness and all this, but also about respect and care and like understanding where people are coming from as well.
Absolutely. Well said, Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Ken, for talking with me about the film. Like, this has been a pleasure, really.
Likewise. It really has. Thank you so much. And for sharing a beautiful image behind you, because it kept me like all happy throughout our conversation.
Yes, that's one of the reasons I use it as my backdrop, because I'm just like, because it used to be just my regular wall, which is teal, but one day I was like, I need a backdrop. I need something like apart from me for people to look at. I was like, why not the beach? Like, the beach is like, it's my personal happy place. So I'm like, I'm gonna put a picture of my personal happy place for people to look at.
I love it. Thank you so much. That is so. Yeah. And thank you for having me on your podcast.
And thank you for joining me, and much success with the film. And I hope that more people get to see it, and it does spark more conversations about what Christmas is supposed to be about. But I think also family and friendship is supposed to be about as well.
Thank you. I wish I could say Happy Christmas, but that would be wrong.
How about Happy Spring?